Welcome back to Rich Words Music, where today we're shooting out two top-of-the-line Harley Benton electric guitars. Now this is the Aeolus, and this is the SC DLX Gotoh edition. And the reason I wanted to compare and contrast these two today is because they pretty much represent, in my opinion at least, the best of the best when it comes to Harley Benton right now. There's a couple of other guitars that came out in 2021, like the newer Fusion models, which kind of reach the heights of these two, but in terms of price and in terms of specifications too, it doesn't get higher than these two guitars. So that's what we're going to focus on today. Now, originally I got the Aeolus a couple of months ago. Harley Benton sent me one to do a demo review video, and I found the guitar to be extremely versatile. It sounds great, it plays great, and it looks great too. And I really wondered why that could be. And it's partly down to the specifications and partly down to these Tesla VR2 pickups, which are humbuckers that can be also split down to single coils. And they sound really, really good for pretty much everything I put them through. I also shot this guitar out against some of the other guitars that I own, like my Fender Telecaster, my Epiphone SG with P90s, my Epiphone Les Paul, and my Ibanez hollow body Artcore guitar as well, and it held its own against all of them. So I was really, really impressed with the Aeolus. And when the SC DLX came out and also had those Tesla pickups, I thought, aha, here we have a pretender to the Aeolus's throne then. This is another Harley Benton guitar which should be able to do pretty much everything. And they both have very good specs, as I've said. So what I'm going to do then is, I think I'll tell you a little bit about the specs of both guitars, then we'll play them in a variety of different styles. We'll do some pop and some rock and some folk and maybe even some metal-y sort of stuff too, see if these guitars can chug. And at the end I'll tell you a little bit more about the playing experiences, how the two guitars feel and how they perform, and which one I think is probably going to be worth your money at the end of the day. Probably going to be a hard decision, but in 30 minutes or so we should probably know a little bit more than we do now. Alright then, so what I'm going to do then is I'll pop the Aeolus down and let's tell you a bit about the specifications first of the SC DLX Gotoh. So we've got Gotoh in the name of this guitar then, and that refers to the fact that we've got a Gotoh tunematic type bridge there, and we've got gold Gotoh Clousson style tuners here up at the headstock. So already something pretty cool for the €349 RRP on this guitar. Now, in terms of the body, we've got a Nyato body, or Nyato, however you say it. It's a mahogany-esque tone wood, and the neck itself is actually mahogany too. The body is finished in this wonderful satin Daphne blue finish, which I really, really like. It's a beautiful guitar, and when that's juxtaposed with the black and gold hardware and the 7-ply binding, it looks absolutely wonderful. I really, really like how this guitar looks. We've got the two Tesla VR2 Alnico 5 humbucking pickups here, 3-way selector switch, a neck volume control, a bridge volume control, and a master tone control. You split the humbuckers down to single coils by pulling up the tone control just like that. Now, this does look like a more modern sort of a Les Paul. You've just got the 3 knobs, of course. If I twist it to the side, you can actually see, if you know, that this body is actually thinner than a Les Paul in this dimension here. And if I flick it round to the back, look, we've got a tummy cut there. And if you look at the heel joint to the neck there as well, you can see this is a more kind of modern neck heel compared to a standard Les Paul. And this one gives you better upper fret access. So let's move up to the neck then. And if you're familiar with Les Paul style thinner necks, you'll be right at home with this one. Now, the neck is satin finish like the rest of the guitar, and it's kind of a slim to medium slim C shape. It feels really good in the hand. It's really easy to get up and down. I really enjoy this neck. We've got 22 medium jumbo frets, and the frets are stainless steel, so that's a great feature. Again, the fingerboard is rosewood, which I also love. I thought rosewood fingerboards on kind of more affordable guitars were a thing of the past, but apparently not. If that's something that can be done sustainably into the future, then I am all for rosewood fingerboards over Pau Ferro or Indian Laurel, that kind of stuff. Now, the nut here is a 43mm Graphtec Tusk nut, so another great feature on this guitar. The fingerboard radius is pretty standard for a Les Paul style guitar. It's around 12 inches. The scale length of the guitar is 628mm, that's 24 3/4 inches. So that's the neck. Like I said, if you know Gibson Les Paul modern necks, you'll really enjoy this one. And on the headstock here, we've got the black front and the blue back with these golden Clousson style Gotoh tuners. So there we go then, that's the SCL DX Gotoh. I'll just pop that down and we'll pick up the Aeolus and speak a little bit about that one. So straight away you can see that the Aeolus is a more classic looking guitar, and it's also a physically much larger guitar. It's wider in this dimension, it's fatter on the lower bout, and it's longer in this dimension too. It's also thicker in the body, than the SC DLX Gotoh. This is the width of a standard Les Paul, pretty much. Now, as I said, semi-hollow, we've got a mahogany body and a flamed maple top on this guitar. You can see the finish is Bengal burst, by the way, but you can see the flamed maple on the top of it as I move it around in the lights there. It's a really beautiful, classy looking guitar. I really like the way the F-holes have been done. We've got wood-coloured binding around the body, and I wish we'd had that in the F-holes too, but I guess that would have just pushed the price up even more. The Aeolus is 50 euros more than the SC DLX Gotoh. This guitar retails for 399 euros, whereas the SC DLX Gotoh is 349. Now, just a quick word about the Tunematic tailpiece here. This is a WSC one, whereas on the SC DLX you have a Gotoh one, of course. Moving up to the neck, you can see straight away that we have access to the truss rod there. You can access it from here without having to take anything off the neck whatsoever, so that's a really cool modern thinking feature. And the other big difference between these two guitars is in the necks then. Now, the neck on the Aeolus is much chunkier than that on the SC DLX Gotoh, and it's also roasted maple, flamed roasted maple in fact, as is the fingerboard. Now, on the fingerboard we have 22 stainless steel medium jumbo frets, so again stainless steel frets, that's a great feature, as is the Graphtec 43mm Tusk nut. Now, the neck of the Aeolus is actually bigger in every direction than that of the SC DLX Gotoh. You've got that wider, thicker, chunkier profile. We've also got a 14-inch fingerboard radius, so it's a flatter fingerboard than the SC DLX Gotoh, and the scale length is also slightly longer. On the Aeolus, it's 635mm, that's 25 inches, so just a quarter of an inch difference in it, but it might make a difference to you. And if I just move up to the headstock there, we've got the black headstock and the Alpha Aeolus logo. And if I flip it over, we actually have Grover locking tuners on the Aeolus, which is a step up from the standard Gotoh tuners on the SC DLX Gotoh. Okay then, so that was a quick run through the specifications, the main key points of the two guitars, and what we're going to do now is play them. We'll play them in a wide variety of styles, as I always do. And my rig for today is going to be my Hughes & Kettner Black Spirit 200 head. We'll go straight from the amp's red box into my recording software, Logic Pro X. There won't be a cab mic'd up or anything like that. We'll start on the amp's clean channel, we'll play some folk and some pop and some indie, and then I'll kick in a Greer Lightspeed overdrive pedal. We'll do some more indie, because I quite like a bit of indie, in case you hadn't noticed. We'll do some classic rock then too. Afterwards we'll go to the amp's lead channel and play some heavier rock, some prog rock and some punk rock too. And finally we'll go back to the amp's clean channel, I'll kick in the Rev G3 distortion pedal, and we'll tune the guitars down to drop D and see how this semi-hollow Aeolus and this not semi-hollow SC DLX handle a bit of metal. So that's all the talking done then. One very final point to mention is the fact that the selector switch on the Aeolus is back to front. So when it's down here, I'm not on the bridge, I'm on the neck. In the middle, it's at the middle. When it's on the neck selector there, I'm actually playing the bridge pickup. Yes, it's quite confusing, but the guitar came to me like this, and because I don't own it, because Harley Benton sent it to me, I didn't change it. But I'll make sure that there is a text in the corner of the screen, so you can always see what's being played at any one time. But if you have questions, please do just ask me. Enough talking then, let's play the Harley Benton Aeolus and the Harley Benton SC DLX Gotoh edition now, and we'll speak in more detail about them afterwards. Okay then, so that was the Harley Benton Aeolus versus the Harley Benton SC DLX Gotoh edition, and I hope you enjoyed this clash of the titans between these two top performers in the Harley Benton catalogue right now. Despite the fact that they look very different, they actually perform very similarly, and in terms of the sounds, we have the same Tesla pickups on both guitars. In some instances, it's quite hard to tell the difference, isn't it? But I'm sure that you had a favourite, so tell me yours down in the comments below. Did you prefer the Aeolus and the semi-hollow vibes of this guitar, or did you prefer the Les Paul solid body performance of the SC DLX Gotoh? Leave me a comment down there, and I'm looking forward to which of the two guitars you guys preferred. But let me go on now and tell you in a bit more detail what I thought about the two instruments and some of the other differences. We'll start, I think, with the build quality and the hardware, and I think it's important again to note at this point that the Aeolus is 50 euros more than the SC DLX Gotoh, so you'll pay 399 euros currently for the Aeolus as opposed to 349 for the SC DLX Gotoh edition. Now, you can probably see right from the off where those extra 50 euros come from. You've got a couple of extra features and specs on the Aeolus, and it's of course a much more complex guitar to produce. It's a carved top, it's semi-hollow as well, much more in terms of steps, in terms of production. It probably takes longer, it's probably easier to get it wrong too. And apart from that though, you've also got the flamed roasted maple neck, which I'm sure adds more to the cost than the mahogany neck on the SC DLX Gotoh, and at the headstock we've got these Grover locking tuners, and that's definitely a step up for me personally compared to the standard Gotoh tuners on the SC DLX Gotoh, which are really good, but if I can get locking tuners over standard tuners, I personally will always do that because it just lets me focus on playing. Once the strings are in tune and in place, you can just get on with it and they'll stick around and not wobble at all. Combining that with the Graphtec Tusk nut, the nut being well cut, the Grover locking tuners doing their job, I had a guitar in the Aeolus that stayed in tune and played fantastically the whole time. Now the rest of the neck is great too, the frets have been cut really well, they seem to have been crowned really well too, the intonation was dead on, the action was nice and low straight from Thomann, no issues there whatsoever, and of course it would be very easy to tweak the neck if I wished to via the truss rod, which you access right there. In terms of the rest of the build quality of the guitar, there's nothing too much that I can complain about really. The finish has been applied incredibly well, the back is nice and smooth, the satin neck, as I've said, is absolutely lovely. There are a couple of QC issues that I wanted to bring up with the Aeolus. The first is what you've already all seen, that's the fact that the switch is the wrong way around. That's probably just a case of going into the guitar and flicking it around if there's enough wire to be able to do that, but just something worth mentioning. The other thing is the fact that if you look inside the F-holes there's a bit of untidy finishing work inside the body, and you can see photos of that if you wish on my dedicated Aeolus video, which is up there. Now in terms of the SC DLX Gotoh, that guitar came to me in a similar state as the Aeolus, pretty much perfect. For 50 euros less, of course, as well. There's nothing I can find in terms of faults with that guitar. The finish has been applied really well, the neck has been done really well, the frets are great, the intonation, the nut has been cut well, all of the Gotoh hardware does its job, of course. You've got full-size pots on both guitars as well, which is something to mention. And in terms of build quality and hardware, for 350 euros or 400 euros, this is something that 5 or 10 years ago we would never have expected at this price point. So in terms of build quality and hardware, full marks for for both guitars. I also want to mention the weight of the two instruments. Now, you would probably think that the Aeolus, being the bigger guitar, might weigh a little bit more, despite the fact that it's semi-hollow, but actually the Aeolus is a little bit lighter. The Aeolus comes in at 3.46 kilograms, which is 7 pounds 10. The SC DLX Gotoh comes in at 3.85 kilograms, which is 8 pounds 8. So there is a little bit of difference in the weights, and I had expected the SC DLX Gotoh to be a little bit lighter because apparently the body is weight relieved to some extent. That's written on the Harley Benton website anyway. But there you go. They both feel great in terms of weights overall. They're both very comfy to play, either standing up or sitting down, with a strap or without a strap. Both very good indeed, but it's just something you should know when it comes to the weights. Let's move on to the necks and the playability now. And of course, a guitar's neck is crucial to your enjoyment of the instrument. And the necks on these two couldn't really be more different if I look at them. We'll start with the Aeolus then. This is the flamed roasted maple neck and fingerboard, and it's a really chunky C shape. It feels really good in my hand. I really feel at home on this neck. Once you get into playing a thicker neck, I find you really like enjoying that thickness, and you don't really feel at home as much on a thinner neck anymore. Lots of beginner guitars, lots of cheaper instruments have thinner necks because they're easier, especially for younger student players, to get their hands round. But I feel that a lot of players do kind of gravitate slightly more towards thicker necks as they get older. Maybe that's just me, but I feel like I know quite a few people who have gone in that direction. And so if you're kind of into sort of more girthier necks, you'll really love the neck on the Aeolus. It's got this beautiful satin finish. It's really easy to get up and down. You have this pretty flat fingerboard too, and combined with the stainless steel frets, you have a nice chunky sort of traditional feeling neck with a modern feeling easy to play fingerboard. So I really love the neck of this guitar. It was very different for me because I've never really spent that much time with roasted maple necks before, but I love the neck on the Aeolus. And just quickly in terms of the rest of the playability of the guitar, we've got a larger body with the Aeolus. It's a semi-hollow instrument. It's physically quite big. If you don't like big guitars, you'll need to look elsewhere, at something like the SC DLX, for example. But I find the Aeolus to be very comfy to play. You do have a chamfer here to get easier upper fret access if that's what you want. So it's not difficult to play. It's not like one of those big, old, difficult to wield hollow body guitars. It's a really modern semi-hollow. It's very easy to play, considering it's a big sized instrument. So I find the neck on the Aeolus fantastic, and I love it in terms of playability. It feels great. I'm really at home with it. Full marks there for me as well. So let me just pick up the SC DLX, which is here. So the SC DLX Gotoh has a much slimmer neck than the Aeolus, and that's just become even more apparent to me now, having literally put the Aeolus down and picked up the SC DLX. They're both C-shaped, they both have a 43mm nut, but this one feels about half the size of the Aeolus. It's not, I'm sure there's only a couple of millimeters in terms of, you know, the measured difference in terms of distance, in terms of size, but it feels significantly different. The SC DLX Gotoh feels to me in this regard much more like a lead player's neck. You know, you've also got that easy upper fret access here as well. You've got the flat rosewood fingerboard, and this slimmer profile really means that you're going to be flying up and down it probably a lot quicker than the Aeolus. For me, as a resolute rhythm player, the Aeolus is all that I need, and I feel really at home with that comfy, chunky neck. I like this slimmer neck a lot too. It's really good to play, but a little bit more extra width and girth for me is where I'm at. In terms of the rest of the playability of the SC DLX Gotoh, it's really good. It's actually really comfortable to have up against the body. You've got the tummy cut here. You've got this extra upper fret access if you need it. The slightly slimmer body means that it's really sleek to have on a strap. It feels really good in that way. And the playability is enhanced by the fact that you've got the Gotoh hardware that does a really good job. Both guitars, like I said, came set up great out of the box and have been great to play. Now, in terms of playability, which one is better? I think they're both at pretty much the same level. And for me personally, my personal taste would say that I prefer the Aeolus because of the neck. You might prefer the slimmer, faster neck of the SC DLX Gotoh. What I would recommend you do, if you're kind of deciding between the two, is test them both out if you can and make your decision based on that. So now let's get to that other absolutely crucial aspect of these two guitars, and that's the sounds. Now, of course, the Aeolus and the SC DLX are very different beasts. They're built with different construction methods, with different woods, with different specs and features, but the one thing they do also share is a pair of Tesla VR2 Alnico 5 humbucking pickups, and the pickups, of course, can be split to single coil modes. And I was actually really surprised upon hearing the sounds back at just how similar the two guitars sounded for quite a lot of the examples that I played, particularly when we went up to more high gain stuff and everything was a bit more compressed. It was really hard for me to tell them apart in some instances, and I would probably be willing to bet that if I had to do a blind test listening to someone playing metal on both these guitars, that I would probably get half of them wrong, because for me it was really, really tricky, and in some cases they pretty much sounded identical. I hope and think that you guys probably agree with me based on what you've just heard, but let me know what you think down there about the sounds, and we'll get a discussion going if necessary. But anyway, when we started with the clean stuff, I was really happy with both guitars. My Hughes & Kettner Black Spirit 200 amp is set up to give a nice, warm, clean sound for pretty much everything with a bit of top-end sparkle, and I thought that both of these guitars did that very well. Now for me, the Aeolus just had a little bit more high-end, a little bit more sparkle, and that was more apparent when we went to single coil, split coil mode as well. I actually thought that when we split down to single coil mode, the Aeolus won in pretty much every example for me. It just has more of a mid-range push, it just sounded a bit fuller and fatter. And both of these guitars lost a lot of output when you go down to single coil mode. They lost a lot of volume on clean mode, and when we went up to crunchier tones, they lost a lot of gain too. You can definitely hear that most obviously in the classic rock settings that I did with humbuckers and with single coils. And for me, the Aeolus won out on single coil mode almost every time. But for clean mode, they were almost neck and neck. I would probably pick the Aeolus as the winner for cleans just because of that tiny little extra bit of top-end sparkle. But it's something that if I was doing this again tomorrow, I might not even notice. I really had to listen out for it. When we went up to the crunch settings, when I put on the Greer Lightspeed pedal, and we did some indie and some classic rock, we were again very, very similar in terms of tones, but I thought that the Aeolus possibly sounded just a little bit fuller. It is a bigger guitar after all, you know, it's a semi-hollow too, and it had a little bit of extra openness, and it also had a little bit more low end. It was just a bigger sound, as befits the bigger body of the guitar, I guess. The SC DLX Gotoh performed really, really well there. It sounded absolutely fantastic, but just in a direct A-B comparison, for me, the fullness of the Aeolus won the day just a little bit. Now, when we went to the amp's lead channel, we were playing some harder rock stuff and some punk rock, and for me it was basically almost impossible to differentiate between the two different tones. One thing that I would say is that I feel like the SC DLX there started to be sort of slightly tighter in the way it performed. I guess the Aeolus being a hollow body means that it's a little bit less tight in its performance. You know, for chugs and stuff like that, you would probably pick a guitar like the SC DLX over a semi-hollow like the Aeolus. Now, in terms of sound quality, I thought they were basically absolutely neck and neck, but in terms of the tightness, I feel that the SC DLX just had the edge. And that also continued into the metal section, down tuned to drop D when I had the Rev G3 distortion pedal on. Again, I just felt there was a little bit of extra tightness there, and if you were picking a guitar to do metal, you'd go for this one over the Aeolus. But at the end of the day, both these guitars are exceptionally versatile. You can play pretty much everything with the SC DLX. The one thing that it won't do is give you kind of a semi-hollow vibe, which is what the Aeolus gives you. And the Aeolus will do that and pretty much everything else. So again, I have to say that the Aeolus has really held its own against yet another high-performing guitar and done an absolutely fantastic job. In the end, I think that you probably have to choose best sounds based on personal taste, and for me personally, I would pick the Aeolus. It has just a little bit more sparkle for the clean tones, and it just sounds a little bit bigger for the indie and the rock stuff, and for me personally, that would make it the choice. And now we come to the final question. If I was to go into a music store and the Harley Benton Aeolus and the Harley Benton SC DLX Gotoh were both there hanging on the wall, and I could take one down and take it home with me, which one would I choose, and why would I choose it? Well, that's a decision, that's a thought process that I've been thinking about quite a lot recently, and sort of agonizing over too, because they're both great guitars. I have to say that straight off the bat. I've had the Aeolus for a couple of months now, and I've had the SC DLX Gotoh for a few weeks, and I've played them both extensively in that time, and I really, really enjoy them both. And so my correct answer would be, I would have them both if I could. But if I was to have to choose one, I would choose the Aeolus, and here's why. It wins for me on just a couple of factors which for me personally give it the edge. It might be totally different for you, so make up your own opinions based on what you've heard and based on the specs and features and what else you've seen in other videos, but for me personally, I would pick the Aeolus for these reasons. Firstly, it's just more my kind of guitar. It just has that kind of feel. It just does what I want it to do a little bit more, and that's a totally personal thing. Secondly though, it has the Grover locking tuners, and for me that is an upgrade over the Gotoh tuners on the SC DLX Gotoh. The Gotoh tuners are absolutely great, they're fine, they held tuning really well, but for me, if I can get locking tuners, I absolutely will. Secondly, I would have to say that the weight is a little bit of a factor. Now, neither of these guitars are super heavy, but I just like the fact that you've got basically, you know, a pound or two less on the Aeolus. It just is going to be more comfortable for me to play standing up for any length of time. Thirdly, I would say the versatility is a factor. Like I said, the SC DLX is also an extremely versatile guitar, but you have the added extra bonus of the Aeolus being a semi-hollow. It can do that semi-hollow thing. It goes a bit jazzier if you want to do that, and it has that more open, bigger, fuller sound, which I really, really like. Next, you have the neck. I really, really like the flamed roasted maple neck on the Aeolus. It has that slightly chunkier feel to it. It just works in my hand. It just sits right. That's just a purely personal taste thing, but I prefer the neck on the Aeolus. And next we come to the sounds. As I said before in my analysis, I think it's very, very close, but just for me in a couple of settings, the Aeolus wins the day slightly there. That's not to say that the SC DLX doesn't have many things going for it, by the way, and I'm not saying that's a bad guitar or a loser in any way, just that I would probably pick the Aeolus today based on what I've heard, played and felt. The SC DLX is a fantastic guitar as well, and that's really, really comfortable to play. It feels great, it looks great too. It might even look better than the Aeolus depending on what mood I'm in, but it's just one which I would probably pick if I was more of a lead player or if I tended more towards heavier metal genres, which I don't. I spend more of my time playing cleaner stuff, edge of breakup stuff, indie and rock, that kind of thing. And for me personally, the Aeolus fits in more with that vibe. But at the end of the day, as I've been saying repeatedly, these are both fantastic guitars and I don't think you can go wrong with either of them. I'd absolutely have no hesitation in recommending both of them. If you're interested, if you're looking at either one of them and you're thinking about taking the plunge, go for it, I would say. If you have the chance to try one with a friend who might happen to own one, do that first. But you know, give yourself a little bit of an education about it. Think about what kind of a neck profile you like. Think about what kind of a player you are. Think about what kind of body size you want from an instrument and choose the one that you think would work for you. Based on my experiences with Harley Benton, and I've had a bunch over the years, I feel like with these ones, you're probably going to get a great setup straight out of the box. Budget in an extra few bucks for another setup from your local guitar tech though to take the guitar to a next level. And with these instruments, with quality fittings like Grovers or Gotohs, with Graphtec Tusk nuts, with stainless steel frets, you're going to have a Harley Benton guitar which is already modded out for you and is going to last you for years and years to come and hopefully progress with you as you continue to progress as a player. That's been it for this video then. It's been quite a long one and I apologize for that, but I hope it's answered all the questions that you may have about both of these guitars. Feel free to let me know your comments, and if you have any more questions about these instruments, let me know down there and I'll answer them all to the best of my ability. If you're still watching, please subscribe to the Rich Words Music channel. I have many more videos with Harley Benton and other well-priced instruments. I do lots of stuff with amps too, with pedals and with other musical instruments. I also talk to a bunch of cool people in the industry and do interviews and stuff like that. Let me know if there's any other instruments that you'd like to see me do in the future and I'll try and get that sorted for 2022. But that's been it for today's video. I've been Rich for Rich Words Music and I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.